So we have to move on now to Marianne's paper. Marianne, whenever you're ready, you can load your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So one of the things we were invited to do in submitting to this conference was to be provocative. I'm actually going to slightly turn that on its head, if I may, and ask you to provoke me. Reason being, this is not even a work in progress yet. This is a planning for, hoping for a change of direction, work in progress somewhere down the line. And that's come about as a result of a lot of things that have happened within Lancaster, within LUMS, where I am, which have changed the structures within which leadership scholarship takes place, which has then challenged me to think about, well, where within all of that does my work fit and what do I want to do? I've also been challenged by, we have a research centre called the Pentland Centre for Sustainability in Business, and Jan Bebbington, who is the director of that, recently, not that recently, I guess, did her kind of inaugural address where she was talking about accountability rather than just accounting in the context of sustainability. So there's a lot of things sort of going on for me that I'm basically using you all as guinea pigs, trying to map out my thinking as it goes along. And as I say, very much hoping that you will provoke me into thinking harder about where I want to take this and what that might mean for my research direction. So I'm going to start by just if you like, kind of getting some technology clear in my head, because the title of this conference around rebooting leadership really kind of challenged me, and I thought, okay, well, I'm not a particularly computer literate person. What does rebooting actually mean? And when I looked at definitions, it said that rebooting was about putting into a state of readiness for operation without changing anything on the computer. And I thought, no, that's not enough. We don't want to just put it back into readiness as it is. That's you know, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So the other option was about resetting, which sounds like it might be a lesser thing than rebooting. But actually, it's potentially going backwards. It's about reverting to the status when it was first purchased, if you're talking about a computer. So what might that mean for leadership? You know, are we going to go back to trait theory or something? But then the other option is reprogramming, which actually involves revising or rewriting the program. And that to me suggests something more fundamentally different from what's gone before, which is potentially what we want to achieve, I think. So putting that in terms of leadership, I mean, I think definitely we want something fairly radical. You know, I think we're all pretty aware of, if you like, the poor historical track record of leadership. We've created many wars and frauds, and we haven't necessarily created the pandemics, but we haven't necessarily solved them particularly well. So, you know, is leadership as a construct, is leadership as an institution something that is necessarily something we want to retain? And this was actually, I know there are some folks here who were in the previous Routledge meeting about a critical handbook of leadership, and these are some of the ideas that we were starting to discuss there, so that was particularly pertinent for me. So as I say, I think rebooting is not enough. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got, and I hope we're not happy with what we've got. If we're resetting, what are we resetting to? I think one of the interesting things about leadership theory is that actually we never quite throw away whatever the previous theory was. We've got this kind of cumulative body of knowledge, but we're not actually throwing away anything. So trait theory comes back as competence theory, you know, that everything is still there in some form, and maybe we need a bit of a clear out. But I'm wondering, and this is where my kernel of an idea, and that's all it is at the moment, for what I think I might want to do, is starting to come out under the heading of reprogramming. So I'm thinking about what's the potential for mapping our best aspirations for leadership, and then moving on to something else. And what I'm doing here is musing on what those best aspirations might be, if you like. And that actually brings me to another dilemma that I'm wrestling with in terms of leadership scholarship. I think in the past we've done a lot of good work around capturing good, if you like, empirical work around how to do leadership, how to do it better, how to do it well, what it really is. But I think in recent years there's been quite a lot of what I would require as advocacy rather than inquiry. We've talked about leadership for purpose, responsible leadership, sustainable leadership, ethical leadership, whatever. And a lot of them are, if you like, more philosophical and more advocating something rather than inquiring into how we might actually do it, what it might look like in practice. And I think the practice turn comes in here as well, as to trying to get away from this idea of advocacy and back to something that is more like inquiry. So to say, that's sort of a side dilemma that I'm also playing with. But I suppose what I'm really wondering here is can we get rid of the L word entirely? Is leadership as a construct, as a concept, actually carrying too much baggage with it now? And maybe we want to go somewhere else. So where might we go? Where might I go? And this is where, as I say, I come back to something that Jan Bebbington said in her inaugural speech about accountability rather than just accounting. And she also talked about the idea of stewardship. She was talking in the context of sustainability and sustainable business, but that just had resonance for me more broadly than that. And the connections between stewardship and leadership, and stewardship as something that is leaderful, if you like. So I started trying to explore this idea of stewardship, and I kept coming up against family business literature, which was something completely new to me. And for a while I thought, no, that's not where I want to go. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about stewardship. I'm not talking about family business, until I really got to understand what it was they were talking about. And the family business literature starts by talking about stewardship of assets. It is stewardship of the family business for the family, for potentially the next generation of the family. And that started to sound like something interesting to me. Then I looked at again, starting within the family business literature, the idea of CSR and how businesses initially, I think, used CSR quite cynically, if you like, as a marketing ploy, but there is now a more genuine sense of stewardship within both family businesses and larger businesses around this issue of CSR. And then I thought, well, okay, can I get myself back to where Jan was talking about sustainability and stewardship, if you like, on a global scale around global sustainable goals. Sorry, sustainable development goals. And those are the connections that I want to try and make, that I want to try and explore. And at the moment I'm thinking, okay, the first thing I need to do is a major systematic literature review, because there's a lot of new literatures in here for me around CSR, around family business, around sustainability. And then, notwithstanding the fact that I want to get rid of the L word, bringing that back to the literature that I already know around leadership. And then there's another idea that came into my head, which is something that I had worked on in a different context, and that's the models of integrated thinking and reporting. I don't know if people are familiar with these. This is something that started off in industry, but it's now quite a big initiative within HE as well, and the idea that we might use this integrated thinking and reporting framework for looking at all our activities and what we do. And the idea is that, in the past we've been answerable to shareholders, and we've been answerable in terms of the return on financial capital that we generate from our activities, but that in a world where we're seeking sustainability, we should be answerable to all stakeholders, not just to shareholders, and we should look at all the capitals that we both use and produce, and we should be seeking to add value across all 6 capitals. And you can see that the capitals that are suggested here as financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social and relationship. And we should acknowledge that we are using all of those capitals, and that we need to develop a new business model that adds value across all of those capitals. So that again had resonance for me in terms of its linkages to stewardship and this idea of accountability rather than just accounting. So I liked that. Bringing that back to leadership, I thought, okay, well, we've got this idea of stewardship within servant leadership. That's potentially interesting. We've got leadership for purpose. That's potentially interesting. It's also got some clear ethical either undertones or overtones. So is there something around, if you like, ethical stewardship that I might explore, that I might investigate? Now, I was conscious here that I was creating something that might look like advocacy here rather than inquiry, and that I'm therefore slipping into my own trap. But as I say, I'm at a very early stage with this at the moment. So what I thought I might then do is some kind of a mapping, if you like, of ethical discourses, ethical ideas within existing leadership theories. And you can see, you know, there's the internalized moral perspective within authentic leadership, and any of you who know my work will know that I'm very critical of that, or not of the internal moralized perspective specifically, but with authentic leadership and with its fundamental inauthenticity in how it is enacted. We've got things like espoused values and integrity within transformational leadership. We've got a personal sense of moral accountability to others within relational leadership, and we've got personal moral agency within leadership as purpose. So I think there are a lot of elements of leadership that we might want to retain, that if we start with the ethical components, we can perhaps bridge that gap towards stewardship as something that is worth inquiring into, but it's not quite that simple. Again, more musings on what we mean by ethical, and it kind of breaks down into these two ideas of conduct and character and the different theories that we have within that, and the debate of ends versus means, and which of those are justified or justifiable. But also, if we look at the character side of it, virtue-based theories, and again we're seeing those emerging within the literature again recently, and what that might mean, what the virtues that should or could underpin leadership might be. Thanks, Nana. I can see I've got 1 minute. So again, more things to noodle on. Then there was the issue for me around, do we mean ethical or do we mean moral? Are we talking about our own principles, or are we talking about something broader that is, if you like, an external source of codes of conduct for us, and the potential for these to be in conflict? You know, you can talk about defense lawyers and potentially defending somebody who they don't feel is innocent, but it is part of their code of conduct that everybody is entitled to do a defense. Or in the medical world, we see, you know, ethically, it's a medical doctor is not allowed to euthanize a patient, even if based on their personal values, they think they should be entitled to end their own suffering. So again, more nuances, more layers. What I think I want to do is to try and pull these all together in some way, potentially under this umbrella of something that we might call ethical stewardship. I think I want to ground it in ideas of accountability and integrated thinking and reporting. And I think there is the potential for macro, meso and micro foci, starting from the family business level and kind of working up to something more global. As I say, very, very early stage, planning for some empirical research further down the road. But this is the point at which I say, please provoke me. Tell me what's wrong with this. Tell me it's already all been done. Tell me anything and everything that this, I hope, provokes you to think about. Thank you.
Thank you,
Stunned silence.
Marian. Yeah, again, like with all the other presentations in this stream, this is quite a strong stream. Yeah, so much to ponder on. I followed your recipe and I Googled, you know, I searched for definition of stewardship. And the first thing that sprang to mind is that stewardship seems to bring together, you know, leadership and management in one word, something that we tend to theorize separately. So I was wondering, I'll read it out to you. It says, the job of supervising, i.e. management, or taking care of something, such as an organization or property, overseeing a property. So it seems to me that, I don't know if, does that help or not, but
it helps. It helps in that it further muddies the waters. Yes, I mean, I think that idea of stewardship, taking care of a property, aligns very much with the ideas of stewardship in the family business. That it's care of family assets for the family, and that's I think that is a useful place to start. I want to see how we bridge that gap between that kind of, or not quite selfish view of stewardship, but certainly quite an inward-looking view of stewardship, to the much more broader global ideas of stewardship that I think I would want to get to. And I'm not sure what all of those connections are yet, but yes, I think that's where I'm starting. Yeah.
Sounds fascinating. I will just pose one really broad, big question, but I won't ask you to respond to it immediately. I will just pose it, and then I'll move on to other people's questions. I see many hands raised. I feel that social constructionism, to which I subscribe as well, has complicated our kind of understanding of morality, and you know, no one mustered courage to go back and try to kind of rethink morality. You know, we seem to be more preoccupied with ethics and ethicality rather than morality is something, you know, that was theorized as universal. So I'm just trying to gain your position on this, or how can we go back and start pondering morality again without falling into the trap of universality. So I'll leave you with this you know, like tiny question, and I'll move on to other people's questions. Johan, you wanted to pose a question for Marianne.
You're on mute, Johan. Can't hear you, I'm afraid. I think you might still be on mute.
Yeah, you're muted, Johan.
Now?
Yes. Great.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Again, my experiments with another microphone panned out the last time, but not this time. So sorry for the canny sound. Probably sounds like I'm sitting in the bathtub or something. Anyway, thank you for that and for these, I would say, slightly provocative things, Marianne. I have one provocative suggestion and one provocative question. The provocative suggestion is that if you're starting to look into family businesses, I would say look at one of the most successful forms of family business ever, the mafia, and the stewardship going on there. Because that is an extreme case, and extreme cases can often teach us a lot, I think. So that was the suggestion. The provocative question, you started by picking up on this thread about should we actually talk about leadership and the baggage that we bring along. And I think that's a key question. I'm having written a textbook dealing with leadership. That is something you struggle with. Should we at all, we know that classic situation theories that have been so questioned empirically, we know that they're not really relevant. Should we at all mention them? It's like chemistry returning to phlogiston theory in the textbook of chemistry. We don't have that. So I think that issue is really, really important. It's a question we need to raise, I think, when we talk and teach about leadership. But my critical question, I wonder if the solution to this baggage of leadership and the romance of leadership is instead starting to romanticize stewardship. Is that a solution, really?
I'm actually not sure of which of your two suggestions I find the most interesting and provocative, because I think they're both amazing. I'm sitting here thinking, how could I possibly get access to investigate the mafia? How
Let's
could I
talk about that?
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that one, but I love that as an idea, and I will go away and ponder that. The idea of romanticizing stewardship is also interesting, and I think, again, for me, it's the danger is that we end up with advocacy versus inquiry again. But the upside is, actually, I think if we are going to address sustainable development goals, if we are actually going to do something that matters, then yes, I think we have to make stewardship exciting and we have to romanticize it. So it's I think for me, the balance between those two needs is actually a really important one, and certainly not one that I have the answer to, but a very good provocation. Thank you very much. Yes.
You're on mute, Nella.
Nella, you're on mute, sorry. No, you're still on mute.
Still mute.
We can't hear you.
My screen had frozen, so I lost control for a second. Nick, you wanted to pose a question.
Hi. Sorry. Hopefully I'm not on mute.
No, we can hear you, Nick. Yeah.
That was very interesting and raised a lot of the thoughts I've been thinking about, the interrelationship between ethics and kind of leadership. Just want to add a sort of couple of riders before I go into my question. The distinction you made between the ethical and moral, that's one way of treating it. There'd be a lot of, say, analytical philosophers who say there isn't a distinction, and that's the terms of just with different roots, Latin and Greek. Hegelians would make another distinction between it. So it's a question of being careful when we present it. The distinction between ethics and morality is contested. Yeah, and I've seen that the way you've done it made before, but not everyone would treat it the same. It was interesting. So when we talk about, you know, leadership as being a relation, and then we start thinking about ethics, we get very subjectivist, non-relational account of ethics. Yeah, so we get Kant, Aristotle, and Mill coming out. Well, actually, if we look much more broadly, our account of ethics, we've got plenty of options to draw from in terms of relational account of ethics. We can think about discourse ethics, we can think about care ethics, we can think of Levinasian ethics of the other, we can think about post-human ethics in terms of entanglements. So I think there comes a problem if we take subjectivist, non-relational account of ethics and then sort of use them to explore relational activities. There's much more interesting points at which to explore. I think what thing I come back to, and it was from kind of my reflections of having to teach ethical leadership. Now, I came late to leadership, more interested in ethics to start off with, is that in the end, I came to the conclusion, it's my slight provocation, that leadership is a formal concept. Yeah, it can be used to do many different things. So actually trying to impose the ethical and saying there's something, this is ethical leadership, non-ethical leadership, doesn't help. It's a formal concept. Yeah, so I think my understanding and the language I started using, it's more interesting to think about the interrelation between ethics and leadership and how they flow, integrate and run up against each other to provide that kind of lively engagement. So ethics can be more sort of radical, so can leadership, and you can feel sort of tensions between the concepts. So maybe do we need a concept of ethical stewardship? Are we thinking about how the relationship between stewardship and ethics happens? And that enables us to explore issues about and make conceptual distinction between the mafia, who may be doing good stewardship, but for we might agree, unacceptable, non-praiseworthy ends. And it might be enables to have a sort of more dynamic way of conceptualizing this space that doesn't domesticate and remove ethics of its teeth.
Thank you for that. As I say, I'm something of a newcomer to, well, significantly a newcomer of the study to ethics. So thank you very much for your initial points. That's really helpful. Am I right in remembering that in the previous meeting that we were in, it was you who mentioned Simon Kelly's empty signifier paper?
No, it wasn't.
All right, okay.
Yeah. But I, you know,
but that got
way
mentioned, and that
yeah.
some of the things that you were saying there had real resonance for me with that. That you know, because it's an empty signifier, we can kind of impose anything we like on leadership. It's a bucket that we can just fill up with whatever we like, and that's not necessarily very helpful. So I would certainly, I like your idea that imposing ethics on leadership isn't necessarily helpful, but that exploring how they engage with each other would be a much more open-ended and therefore more constructive way of challenging myself to think about that. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, I can see some
yes,
comments in the text as well.
Comments is from me and Johan, so you can look at it later. We're just suggesting how you can actually integrate Marcia. I think we're trying to get you into the ranks of Marcia. And we have a question from Shubhashni. Shubhashni.
Hi, Marianne. Lovely presentation. Thank you. I really enjoyed listening to that, and it's kind of helping me with my writing, my discussion section, because when you speak about ethics and morality, and when you speak about leadership and stewardship, so I've got two distinct responses, right, in Mauritius and South Africa in terms of stewardship. Right, and then you bring up the notion of family-owned businesses. Okay, now one of the things that come up, I mean, when you look at stewardship, do you look at vision in there as well, as leaders providing vision? Because when we look at transformational leadership, providing a vision is the dominant thought around transformational leadership, right? And stewardship is probably, from what my understanding, and I haven't really looked a lot into it, it's just one of the things that have come out when I look at the Mauritian data, right? And being family-owned businesses, predominantly in Mauritius, or entrepreneurial businesses that have grown up, a lot of the people seem to think that strong stewardship, giving direction, basically telling followers what to do, is that what you look at in terms of stewardship? Or participative and working together to create a vision?
I think that's a very interesting question for me, because again, I'm new to the family business literature, but one of the things that I observed there was an evolution from, it was literally about preserving assets. So it wasn't visionary in that sense. It was quite static, to then moving forward into, I think, what I would describe as a much more visionary view of what it meant to conserve the family business, which was around saying things like, okay, well, my son doesn't want to be part of our existing business, but he has got great ideas that maybe we could develop an offshoot business that he would then still be part of something within the family, but not necessarily part of what the family business already is. So I think I sense that there is something more visionary emerging in the family business literature. And I think that's also, again, why they're looking at CSR now in a way that they hadn't done before. But again, I don't yet know how far they go in that direction and whether they go far enough, but I think it's a very good question. So thank you for that.
Yeah, one more point. When you look at that, okay, so my son wants to diversify. So would you consider that more into this new concept of entrepreneur leadership within an existing organization? So not necessarily my son, but members of the team.
Yes, yes. It came out of, again, I've got colleagues within Lancaster who are at the intersection between entrepreneurship and family business research, and that was where they saw that type of work emerging. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thanks a lot, Marianne. Yeah. Great presentation.
I mean, folks like Alan Discoa-Cruz, if you look at his work, Angela Caradas, I think she's written in the same area. So it's that intersection between entrepreneurship and family business work. Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay, thank
Shivani,
you.
and thank you, Marianne. I'm sorry to be the one to cut all these interesting conversations short. Thank you to all our presenters. The time has really, passed by in a second. We have a networking session after this if you wish to join it, and we have our next keynote address is Jean Hartley talking about rebooting leadership through public innovation. It was lovely listening to you. Thanks to our audience for the very thought-provoking questions, and see you around.
Thank you very much, Nella.
Thank you, Nella. Thank you.
You're welcome.